I'm Teresa Batista. I'm the head of unit of Environment and Development of CIMAC, where Chebec project is held. I would like to, in the name of the President of CIMAC, to give you all the welcome to this first Chebec webinar. This is the first one of 3 webinars that will be organized by CIMAC in the project, the Chebec contest. And I will give you all welcome, and especially to Tom Fleming, that will be our speaker today, and also to the participants here in CIMAC and all the remote participants that are in the several regions. The Chebec project is an Interreg Mediterranean project. It's co-financed by the European Regional Development Fund, and it's about hacking the Mediterranean economy through cultural and creative ecosystems, and the sector of creative cultural sector. We have 10 partners: Aster, A.M.I, the Municipality of Bologna, CIMAC, the University of Valencia, the region of Lazio, the official Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Shipping of Seville, the Barcelona Activa, the Artifarti of Lyon, and the CERDA of Sarajevo partners. Today, Tom Fleming will be holding this first web seminar that will aim to speak about strategy and partnership, how this can support the creative ecosystem. Cultural and creativity can be drivers for territorial development, not only in the economical dimension, but also in the social, environmental, and political dimension. So this first talk will be about this subject, and will be addressed mainly to the decision makers and the stakeholders of Chebec regions. Tom Fleming is an expert in these matters. Is a leading international expertising on creative economy, cultural and art policy, and creative cities and regions. He has a strong experience in leading projects in these matters in Europe, Russia, Asia, Caribbean, Africa and Middle East. Well, it's everywhere. So he's the first speaker of these webinars, and I think it's a very, very interesting person to introduce us to this theme.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this first webinar for the Chebec program. The purpose of this as a webinar is to have a conversation, a structured conversation, where through this session and the overall program, we can hopefully not just hear from each other, but also learn together. I'm very excited to be in a conversation with such a diversity of cities from across Europe, on all different sizes as well. So this is an opportunity to think imaginatively about how we nurture the creative ecosystems in different types of place, looking at distinctive approaches, but looking at shared opportunities, or looking at the tools that can be developed and applied across all of the cities. So I really encourage you in this session to participate in terms of asking some questions, but also hopefully providing some ideas, some solutions which you think could be relevant to other cities, or just maybe something that you're passionate about that you'd like to share with us all. I'm going to kick off with a short presentation, which I hope will set some themes, some overarching concepts, and then I'm going to come to some questions, which I think were also shared with the cities beforehand. And those questions, I think, will help to give us a more structured approach towards how we are nurturing the creative ecosystem in different cities. As you heard in the introduction, I run a research and consultancy organisation, and we work all over the world in supporting local places, municipalities, cities, regions, to develop and grow their cultural and creative industries sector. And this is not just about hard economics. This is about nurturing relationships and developing tailored approaches towards creativity in specific places. So I know that some of the policy drivers, the key reasons for developing a strategic approach to the cultural and the creative industries are very clearly about economic development and growth. The way that the creative industries more broadly can provide productive, relatively high value economic activities. The way that the sector across Europe has been quite resilient to economic downturns and is growing faster than other parts of the economy. But also the way the creative industries is proportionately a small or micro business sector, which means that it's drawing from a wide talent pool of individual actors or small businesses who are helping to diversify the economic base and to develop perhaps a more balanced economy overall. We know as well that there are strategic opportunities by supporting the creative industries to deliver or develop spillover effects across the economy. So, for example, the role that creative practitioners or artists can have in the innovation system, working with partners in manufacturing, in the services sector. Or, for example, the way that the dynamic and strong cultural and creative industry sector can help to drive the tourism sector, can help to enhance the quality of the experience of a place, can help to improve the aesthetics, the design qualities of other sectors in gastronomy, in life sciences, etc. We know as well that the creative and cultural industries are expressive of particular cultural identities. They are, by their very nature, about generating meaning and values. And that means they are going to be different in different places. And the art, but also the challenge in supporting the cultural and creative industries is being able to indulge their distinctiveness, to work with the distinctive identity of your place, the story of that place, the story of the cultural sector in that place, but also to develop universal or transversal stories, narratives, identities that people can understand elsewhere, that they can buy into as a service or a product. And that is a real opportunity for many different places. It's not just about the big cities here, because everywhere has a story to tell, a distinctive ecosystem to nurture, which in turn generates opportunities for supporting business development, growth, and generating spillover effects across the economy. However, we need to also be careful not to just replicate. There are many cities across Europe and internationally that prefix their name with the word creative. And they undertake branding exercises, they undertake cultural tourism programs, they develop a facade of creativity without getting underneath the distinctive reality of their creative and cultural industry sector, and without supporting long-term development pathways for the creative industries sector. And this is where evidence comes into play, developing really strong, clear evidence of what your assets are, what your opportunities are, what your markets are, where the challenges are and how you overcome them. It's also about new types of partnership as well. So the creative industries should not just sit within one department, although it needs to be led by somebody or a team in a department. It needs to be something that works across the boundaries of governance, across the boundaries of sectors, which is why when you develop your strategies, this is something that connects education, it connects economic development, it connects the inward investment agendas, It connects with the cultural tourism agendas. It needs a kind of transversal approach to partnership, but also a smartly specialist approach to leadership, depending on what your particular strengths are. So in our work I think in the way that policy and investment is changing in the creative industries, that we're seeing much more of a focus on the distinctive local development pathways for the creative economy. The UN, in their previous to last major study, talk about the importance of going beyond overarching generic approaches that just celebrate the creative industries but don't get under the skin of it, toward having a much more nuanced and flexible approach to sector development through local development pathways. And partly this is about getting beyond an agenda that has been driven by larger cities, by major creative hubs across Europe and internationally, and recognizing that smaller cities can also play a meaningful role in the creative economy, and that practitioners, creative businesses, cultural organizations in those smaller cities can themselves develop sustainable business models. They can contribute economically, as well, of course, as culturally, to a changing place, a changing social and cultural and economic geography. But wrapped up in all of this is about relationships, which is why the concept of the ecosystem is so helpful here, because there is no way of nurturing a creative economy unless you look at nurturing interrelationships within the creative ecosystem. And this is about people, on the one hand. It's about understanding the sets of interdependencies that you have in a place, particularly in a place where creative businesses are often very, very small. It's about institutions and recognizing that you need not just your economic development agencies, you need your universities, you need your further education colleges, you need your schools, you need your cultural organizations, you need a whole range of actors and players to set up this and nurture a sustainable creative ecosystem. And it's upon the quality of the conversations and the interrelationships that you have in a place that the creative economy develops its competitiveness and its innovation and is able to grow. So how do we in different places nurture this creative ecosystem? What are the key starting points? What are the transversal tools, the things we can share, but also the things that we can develop that are only possible in our own cities, in our distinctive cities? And there's one kind of value kind of construct which I like here, which is the notion that in a creative economy, we're not looking at linear value chains or supply chains. We're not looking at a process where you have somebody makes an idea, they develop that idea, they turn it into a product or service that then gets distributed, that then gets sold, that then gets consumed. We're looking at almost a collaborative ecosystem where there's a lot of interdependency through sharing, through exchange. Some of it is monetized, a lot of it is actually through a conversation, which isn't monetized. A lot of it is through the practice of art and culture, and not always about the commercialization. So we're moving perhaps in terms of understanding how to develop a creative ecosystem to the notion of a value web as opposed to a supply chain. Webs of people who share values and they're committed to nurturing and developing a creative ecosystem in a particular place as a basis for a strong and dynamic creative economy. And what's at the heart of these value webs? It's people. It's individual, talented people who are actively participating in generating meaning through creative expression. And ecosystems that help to nurture their creative talent, that give people a platform, that they back them, they provide a supporting and enabling environment, are those that in turn can change into successful creative economies. So the ecosystems that work best, they're the stickiest. They're the ones where the ideas develop and grow, where talent feels that it has a role, and therefore talent can plug in and play and not feel it has to go elsewhere, to leave town to be valued. They're also the thickest in terms of the strength and the quality of the networks, the pipeline of ideas, the festivals, the university sector, the business networks, the hubs and the clusters. They're also the most aspirational. They're the ones that generate a good, positive feeling about the quality of this place and the way that they champion and support creativity and the diversity of creative perspectives. And they're also the ones that mobilize desire to participate in the long-term transformation of this place through creative participation, but also in turn that city, that place, into an object of desire that other cities and places, other talented people from other places want to participate in. So all the cities you can think of which have a strong, dynamic, creative ecosystem become themselves objects of desire to stay in or to go to participate with. So when we think about nurturing the creative ecosystem, of course it's about the creative entrepreneur, giving people the tools to develop and grow their businesses, for their ideas to be tested and ideas to be fulfilled. But I think there's also a social element to this as well. If you just go for unbridled growth, then you lose the personal and you lose the quality of the conversation. And you also close off participation to people in society who haven't got the confidence or haven't got the social connections or haven't even got the formal education, but they have the ideas, they have the talent. So we need to think about how you bring together social and creative and economic agendas to nurture a sustainable and inclusive creative ecosystem. Now, there are different building blocks towards supporting and nurturing a creative ecosystem. There is no single roadmap, as I said. We need to do this in a tailored and evidence-based way, driven through new types of partnership, refreshed by different types of leadership. The accountancy firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, a few years ago talked about the business of creativity, and they came up with what they saw as 7 key building blocks for going from having creative talent on the one hand to having a strong and dynamic creative economy on the other hand. Or in other words, nurturing a creative ecosystem. They talked about people, the first P, the talent base, creative education in your school through to your further and higher education sector. Creative R&D that connects different sectors, that doesn't just put the arts over here and science and technology there. They talked about place and the importance of having physical places for the co-location of different types of creative activity. So models for shared workspace, creative hubs, creative networks. They also talked about the festival sector being really key for testing ideas, commissioning new work, amplifying your creative qualities. They talk about property, as in intellectual property, giving people the skills to be able to confidently exchange ideas and not just hold back and protect. Being able to have the legal literacy to be able to turn an idea into a product or a service, and to do so collaboratively rather than just by protecting for protection's sake. They talk about pipes, the digital infrastructure needed to connect you locally and internationally. So the idea that creative ecosystems are nurtured only in a specific place only generates value if you see that place as being connected across webs of other places. So a small city will generate access to markets and access to scale through collaborating with and being connected to ecosystems in other places, in other cities. They talk about picture. This is the evidence base, developing strong, detailed baseline analysis, developing open systems for creative exchange that generate new ideas, that help you to prioritize the kinds of investments that you make. And they also talk about the importance of continually evaluating and benchmarking. So you're testing yourselves in terms of the quality and the scalability of your creative industry sector compared to other places in other parts of the world. They talk about, and this was a UK company, so they talk about pounds, but in Brazil it would be real, if it was here it would be euros, depending on where you are. Investment models. How do you invest in a sustainable way the creative industry sector? So different tools, from a subsidized model for the arts and cultural sector where there is a proportionately large amount of grant funding, through to risk capital for scalable creative digital companies, and everywhere in between, project finance, developing networks of business angels, developing R&D tax credits, a whole regulatory and investment landscape that effectively nurtures a diversity of practice within a creative ecosystem. And they finally talk about perception. How do you tell the story of your creative economy? How do you build a brand, but also an authentic narrative that works and is owned and understood locally, but it also is legible and an object of desire nationally and internationally? But really, I think that you can have these kinds of different approaches, these different pathways to developing and growing a creative ecosystem. But I think there are some fundamental kind of values that are really important wherever you are. One of them is the exciting but sometimes messy intersection between community, heritage, creativity, arts, and business. And a creative ecosystem is inclusive of all of those areas. You need active civil society. You need not-for-profit social activities. You need your social enterprises. You need to build on the identities of the past, and you need to nurture new types of cultural and creative practice in your heritage buildings within a wider sense of place. You need to connect people who are working as individual artists, and that's what motivates them, with people who are working to translate creative arts into new products and services, who are developing businesses that are about generating creative value, but also economic value. And there are different models for this. There are different types of intersection that are really critical for the creative ecosystem. Different types of hub and cluster, such as the Pervasive Media Studio in the city of Bristol in the UK, which brings together artists, scientists, technologists, educationalists, community organisations, festivals, with some funding to invest in shared collaborative projects. The nurturing an interdisciplinary environment as a way of giving energy and distinctiveness to the creative ecosystem. There are lots of opportunities for the university sector to become a key catalyst and an anchor for the creative ecosystem, giving their creative talent pool opportunities to collaborate with the arts and cultural sector and with creative industries, businesses at an earlier stage, developing the kind of third space between education and business and research that can generate new ideas and new ways of working, trying to break down the boundaries between academic and teaching work and the development of innovative practice in the economy. And there are ways of reconceptualizing the creative economy towards a more grassroots understanding of creative communities. And this is where partnership and leadership is so key, because the art of the creative ecosystem is being able to facilitate boundary-crossing relationships between different types of stakeholder who in turn generate new types of value through the conversations they're having with one another. And that requires multiple tools in multiple types of space. But it's underpinned by a shared sense of pride and purpose in a particular place to explore the potential of a city in terms of its creativity and its art and its culture. And it requires a generosity of spirit, which goes beyond something you can put in a plan. So leadership is key here, getting people who are charismatic and energetic to help to be the connectors and the facilitators of the ecosystem. So these are just some overarching thoughts about the kinds of elements that are key to a creative ecosystem. But just to summarize, I would say that it's about generosity, it's about inclusion, and it's about a recognition that you need to cross boundaries and generate new ways of working if your ecosystem is going to be distinctive, inclusive, and sustainable. In the run-up to this webinar, I introduced some overarching or headline questions that I would like the participants from the different cities to consider. And this is all in the spirit of exchange and understanding difference, but also where there are some shared agendas. And I recognise that the cities in this programme they're different in size, They're different in terms of their partnership and leadership structures. They're different in terms of the qualities of their cultural and creative industries sector. They're different in terms of the extent to which there is an existing strategy or partnership infrastructure. And I think that they're probably also different in terms of some of the values that have driven them to participate in the creative economy paradigm. So what I will do now is just hopefully help to facilitate a conversation with you all to explore these different questions. And I'll just repeat the questions partly for just to get everyone in the mood, but also so that my colleagues here as well in ÉVORA can consider what they would do in response to these questions. The first question is, what are the strategic reasons for developing a creative ecosystem or cluster or program? So why did you get involved in this in the first place? Because I think that helps us to understand the values that are driving this. What are the key motivating areas here? The second question is, how can creative ecosystems become sustainable, inclusive, and competitive? And this is the big pivot point, really, from having a strong arts and cultural and creative sector, which is open to different communities, to different identities, but also able to be able to find that sweet spot where you can develop commercial creative businesses through that quality of creative activity. Third question, are there standardized international mechanisms on culture and creativity which can be adapted to different types and scales of city and region? So I've given a general overview there, but are there specific areas that you think actually this works across the landscape in each of our cities? Fourth question, what are the different tools for larger cities, smaller cities, high density or low density urban areas? So it links to the question above, really. Do we need to have totally different approaches in the big cities compared to the small cities? Or is it about breaking up those bigger cities into smaller communities, into hubs, into clusters, which have the same qualities that you have in a smaller, lower density city? And finally, and I mentioned this earlier in terms of evaluation and measurement, how to measure and use the direct and indirect socio-economic evidence for the social and creative sector in the MED territories. What are the approaches to evaluation, to benchmarking? Who's already doing that, and what can we learn from each other? Okay, so I think now we have a conversation.
My name is Luis. I'm from a small town in this region, Portugal. We have a big area, 600 kilometers, and only 6,000 persons living there. About how we create trust to start in consolidating this process. I think it's maybe the most important key of to start create trust in the institutions, trust with the government, and trust with the people. People with ideas, and we want have desire to start the process. So I want to hear you and the others about the importance of the trust in this process.
And obviously trust is something that doesn't come easily in these days, not least in politics, but also perhaps there are challenges in finding some shared values that we need to consider.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Okay, hello. I'm a manager. I work in the professional performing arts industry. And I'm focused in organizing tours for companies in my country and abroad. So in that sense, I think I can help to be a kind of a creative partner in my city when I invite international theater companies and I offer different innovation or different innovative proposals. Maybe it's what you are meaning. I think my purpose or my mission, I've understood in the recent years, maybe actually do my city more creative in the way of feeling myself as a kind of motor or how you say, I've understood with the job I'm doing my job since 20 years, and in the last 8 years or 5 years most, realized that I'm working to do my people more open to other realities, other cultures. I'm inviting European companies, groups to Spain and introducing new forms of seeing theater and arts. And I think that from my job, I'm trying to help a little bit. I'm putting a grain to make the audiences maybe more open, more creative. I don't know. I'm trying to understand if what's your question, how to relate with my job and what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm catching it or not. Am I developing a more creative city because I'm inviting companies and I'm offering a different kind of theater play or different ways of seeing arts from abroad?
And obviously you're playing a role as a key actor in opening up your city and connecting it internationally. What does the partnership structure look like? Who else are you working with in developing this creative city? Is it in the municipality or the universities? What does that look like?
In my case, it's the public theaters. Public organization is the public municipality. It can be the city hall. It can be also the regional. It depends on what organization is ruling the theaters or the performing arts venues. But yeah, mainly it's the public administrators of the theaters and arts venues.
And is there an actual shared strategy is there a shared strategy for Valencia for the creative economy? Do you all work together for a clear overarching goal, or is it more informal than this?
Before, I think in the last years it was more informal. There was no plan, a real strategy, but I think now the new government has made an improvement. And they are really planning a kind of a strategy to build Valencia more creative and more open to other countries. And I think that's why, for the very first time in my city, I'm going to be a collaborator with the main public theater, inviting British and French companies, and I'm one of the partners. So when they wanted to open the theater to the international scene, they talked to me. They knew that I was working internationally, so they talked to me. So I think now I feel that they are searching for a model of being more creative, and I also feel with the city hall, the municipality in Valencia.
We have a question from Asta on how to imagine a regional role for creative policies and the importance of having an active regional government. It'd be interesting if any of the cities that are participating in this are working at a regional level as well, or if regional government is investing in and supporting the creative economy.
Hi, I'm Chebec, I'm from Master, and we were here with some colleagues, and we were discussing about as a regional innovation agency, we can further support creative industries. Since you talked about networking and cross-cutting action between sustainability, social innovations, economic challenges. As a region, maybe we can fear ourselves a little bit far from the creative. So how we can match their needs? It's just about coordinating the city level, which is closer to the creative industry's needs, or shall we design tools and policies able to really match this tool, these challenges, providing that, in my opinion, the tools we are going to offer shall be very, very much customized on each creative need.
A little bit more information about how you're identifying those needs. What is the system around research and partnership?
We try to networking activities or to understand what they do through questionnaires to underline common fields of interest. But we going ahead with programs, we understood.
University of Valencia. Aha. Oh, hello. Hi. How are you?
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, well, we are developing here at regional level the cultural strategy for the Valencian government. It has been a participatory process, and the main characteristic is the design of this strategic planning. Not easy, because the crisis and the change of the government make that it was a slow process, not a speed change between with the change of the government. But another, I mean, if I have to remark the characteristics in terms of policy style, that I think it's important, no? The question of the governance, the need to design this kind of strategic vision in order to have some kind of long-term development, because it's true that there are structural changes and different dimensions involved, not just the cultural and social, but also in terms of the economic productive sectors that are involved in this transformation, but also the same public institutions in the public policies, and even in the questions linked with the market, for example, for financial issues. So I mean, it's true that independently that we are speaking about local level or regional level, complexity is one of the trademarks when you are talking about this cultural planning for connect with processes of economic development or socioeconomic development, and the question of the public participation also, because I mean, this question of the ecosystem and the different actors involved, it's at the same time it's true that this how the different actors involved in the actions or in the planning, it needs a participatory process. And I mean, I have also a question for Tom. According to his experience, I was thinking about some kind of model. If we can make some kind of classification or some kind of categorization of different experiences according to the conditions of these different territories, if we can, with the criteria, with three criteria, according to the role of the market in this planning, the public policies or the institutional approach, the question of the governance, and the question of the value that culture has for the society. Okay, so we are talking about role of the market, governance, and value of the culture for the society, because it changed, no, according to this. If you have like three kind of scenarios that we can find according to your experience and according to, at a global level, I mean, not just in the Med area, but Europe or outside, if it makes sense to you also to think about this question of not models because we must follow this, but to try to identify like keywords, no, in some sense, to this complex scenario that we are managing, what items or what keywords we have on the table, not to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one approach which is starting to be developed is, rather than having a strategy, you have an inquiry. And an inquiry is like a soul-searching exercise. So it's really about, in a very participatory way, engaging all of the actors as much as you can across the arts, cultural, creative industry sector, profit and not-for-profit, social enterprises, but also the key building blocks for civil society, the education partners, the chambers of commerce, the local and regional government, and actually start off almost with a blank piece of paper. The blank piece of paper, the first task is to find what it is that you feel collectively is a differentiator, the distinctive identity or distinctive cultural and creative proposition that you have in this place. So it's almost about brainstorming about your place. And then from that, you start to get some themes emerging. And this has to be very grand in its scale. You can't just do this by having some workshops. They have to be, almost like town hall meetings, big things that are really inclusive. You need to have a lot of digital participatory activities as well. There needs to be a whole range of different tools. But gradually you're distilling the conversation towards some key overarching themes. And then you can start to think about governance around those themes and having task and finish groups, structured focus partnerships that can work around around certain themes. For example, around creative education and skills, around hubs, creative workspace hubs and infrastructure, creative networks. But don't start off with those. Start off with the kind of DNA of the place, the cultural identities and the way they're changing, the narrative. So we've seen this in different ways. I think that things like European capitals of culture actually they're like cultural inquiries, because they look at culture and creativity in a holistic way. They're not just about growing the creative industries. They're about inclusion, they're about sustainability, they're about quality of place, quality of the civil society. And they require a root and branch review of everything you do in a city. They require you to look at everything. And they also require you to identify new horizons through that process. And if you can, in a city or region, identify the impulse to look at new horizons. It doesn't have to be European capital of culture, but it could be something else. It could be around how you collectively respond to changes in the demographics of a place. It could be around how you respond to the crisis of losing talent. Or it could be a whole range of different drivers. But if you can position culture and the creative industries as part of a holistic review of your overarching strategy for a city or a region, then you can break down some of those boundaries and be perhaps in a more imaginative and inclusive and participatory way plan for the long term. This requires a lot of trust, and I think that the word trust was mentioned earlier on. It also requires a lot of vision and confidence from political leaders and the key institutions, because they have to open up, and they have to open up if you're going to innovate in this space. So be holistic, and don't just put the creative industries as one small thing. Put creativity as a big thing. Can I just ask you a question, though? I'd be interested in going back to your point in Valencia around your methodology for the strategy. How are you bringing that diversity of partners together? And how are you staging the conversation so that you can have political leadership, but also the sector can feel that it is also part of that leadership, and it owns the vision and the process of the strategy as much as the people in the civil service or the politicians.
So first phase was to develop some kind of participatory rounds with different actors involved from different sectors, economic sectors. I mean, it's true that the conditions were not the ideal, because in terms of time and resources was limited, and the idea was to as you know, was again the question of the plan was the process was restricted by the political timing, in terms that we cover all the process from the point of view of the diagnosis with this participatory, but the idea was that for these 4 years of government, they want a plan to start to work with. So, I mean, the time management was really strict, was really fast. So the idea was to have these different phases developed with the participatory process, with the different actors involved from the different sectors, to try to create this kind of consensus or conditions as a starting point, to have a clear picture about the conditions, the starting point, and then to develop the different strategic planning with the projects, with the programs. Because again, I mean, for me, it's true that I mean, finally, you are when you are talking about this kind of process, and especially if you are ambitious in terms of the impact of this kind of processes, you are talking about power, a power structure that is going to be transformed, and decision making. We are talking about budget. So the question of the accountability is also an important thing. No, how to not just this technical process of design the plan and design the project with the different the action plan. No, how to develop this kind of technical plan, but at the same time how to evaluate the impacts and the success of development of the plan. No, and this is also another challenge, because when you have to not just to evaluate short-term impacts, but you are trying to evaluate some kind of long-term process, and I mean, at the same time, it's not a science, no? With culture and with social challenges and so on, you maybe can anticipate or can create some kind of proxy, no? In terms of, okay, that's the way we want to go. That this is the, but it's not like physics, no? That it is some kind of program of the situation, because it's a living thing, no? So right now the process it has been really focused in this question that create a participatory process in the beginning, okay, and then also to monitoring the development of the plan. So next year will be the elections. I was checking now here the different degree of the actions that have been involved, and more or less the panorama is quite good according to the plan. It's true that the context again makes a difference, because it's not the same to try to develop this kind of plan that is ambitious. It's it's like a new way to do culture in the region, and with more social approach and with more economic approach also in terms of employment. But the budget restriction, because the crisis, is also a question to consider. So it's...
Okay, thank you. That was really illuminating, very helpful. And it opens up lots of questions, I think, as well around around evaluation, around benchmarking, around balancing ownership, being inclusive, but also being able to focus on things and get things done.
We are A.M.I from Marseille, and we have a question. I will try to summarize what we are talking just now. A.M.I, for us, we are acting in a different level because we are a cultural operator. We are not institution. We are not a university. It's not maybe our task to bring people together, and it's more to the institution, local authorities. And the question is maybe how can we influence them to be heard by them, and that they change their policy in a local and national and international context.
Do the municipalities or other strategic partners, do they empower you to play a leadership role in, for example, researching the sector and its needs, or in staging consultation and engagement activities? Do they say, you are connected, you are part of the grassroots of the sector, can you help us to build the strategy?
I just want to say that A.M.I is really like a cultural operator. So on our level, we bring people together in our everyday work, meaning, for example, that we have the cultural incubator. We have co-workers that come and have offices in our offices, and that in this way we influence the ecosystem, but on our level. Then again, as you were asking, that if the local authorities see us as an important part of it, I guess yes, because part of our work is subsidized by the city and by the local governance. But I think that the fact that as we work in the Chebec program in European level, this will bring us a new tool to valorize our work and perhaps get more credit from the local authorities, so that they see the importance of our work by the capitalization, by the evaluation that we will be doing in the program.
I think that's a really important point, absolutely, and thank you for making that. Because I see across Europe and outside of Europe too many situations where there is a gap between the municipality on the one hand and the sector, the arts and culture sector on the other. And you need strong cultural organizations as intermediaries to be part of the leadership solution. So building and growing organizations like you is a critical part of the ecosystem mix. But too often, it's very fragile. Yeah, and there isn't enough there isn't enough shared purpose between the different strategic actors. So I think it will be interesting in this whole program to learn more about what you're doing and organizations like you as being right at the heart of this long-term strategic development process for culture and creativity. So thank you for making that point.
Just a question. I have shared with you, because my explanation was not really good, I just shared a link with a short documentary about the process of the regional cultural plan in Valencia. It's with English subtitles, so you can check it and you can understand in a better way what I have tried to explain in a few minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Raul. That's really, really helpful, and I will look at that. And I would encourage you all, if you have other things, to just post them and get this conversation working in different ways, to share examples of good practice, challenges, opportunities. Okay, everybody. I'm going to say thank you all for your time. I know that this is the first webinar, and it's always technically difficult to organise this, but I think at least we've all seen each other now, and we can wave at each other, and we can build a much more collaborative approach over the course of the programme. So thank you very much, and goodbye from ÉVORA.
So I was asking the participants how can we work in building this creative ecosystem, because I don't think we have it still. It's a way, but we don't, I think we all agree on that.
When we've been doing cultural strategies or creative industry strategies, you have to start with a conversation. And there isn't just one set of people. You have to go out there and do all kinds of different conversation. So I suppose the starting point for this conversation here is around how do we connect? Where are the spaces and the networks in the region where you could actually come together and ask people what is possible here? And get a sense of the energy and the appetites from people as well.
We're talking, it's important to meet each other, face each other, and discuss what we want for our cities in our region as a whole. So that document is a document of principles for a cultural strategy for the Alentejo Central region. I do think and I believe that that document can be a starting point to discuss what we want in terms of cultural and creative ecosystem. What do we want to achieve within each city and collectively for the entire region. So it is important to know and understand from other cities how can we work and share in a common region. Where is our common ground? What is our starting point? Where do we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years regarding cultural development and urban development? Because when you talk about cultural development and linking to creative economy, linking to social economy, we are not only talking about creating growth and jobs. We must think beyond all those. Of course, those are important and significant because we all need to eat and to pay our bills and so on. But that's not the main point, as I can see things. So it would be interesting to even at a political level. We have some politicians sitting today here with us. So it would be interesting to share and start discussing what could be our role in cultural and creative industries on this platform.
What it is that you value in this construct, cultural and creative industries. And also to unpick a little bit between how you build from what you have, so how you build from your existing cultural and creative sector, the cultural offer, provision, how people are engaging in culture, how you start with what you have, but also how you think about what is possible in terms of things coming in, but also how you project yourselves externally as well, reaching out beyond this area. There's no perfect question here, but I almost think it is, why are you doing this? Why do you want to have a strategic approach over the long term together through culture and creative industries? Pretty basic question.
And she thinks that we should have the same approach in other kinds of cultural assets. Yeah. So because we are able to promote a lot outside the fado, the canto noventano, the play figures for the we are very effective in promoting that outside. So we should do the same with other type of cultural and creativity assets.
How do we meet? That has, if you have more scale, then you have more visibility, but you also have more capacity to coordinate activities. To what extent is it about just being pragmatic about a scale question, or is it also that there's an opportunity to look at the kind of how you have an enriching relationship where you exchange ideas and you celebrate your differences, but also you create new culture together through joint working, new intangible cultural heritage based on the old. So not just having what we have, but moving together. And to what extent, because everything always ends up being about tourism, but of course, to grow, to have a strong cultural tourism offer, you have to have a strong contemporary cultural existence. And I guess this is an area of the world with incredible heritage. But how do we make that a living, breathing heritage as well, with innovation and excellence frothing from this heritage landscape?
So from Gontu, Counselor for Culture, he thinks that concerning your questions, the third one, where you ask is there common tools that we can apply to different scales, he thinks so, that we should apply eventually the same tools, and we'd like you to explain a bit more which kind of tools and methodologies can be used in these low density areas that are already used in other type of regions and that you think it could work in our territory.
Well, I would need to do more research, obviously, to understand the territory. But I think that there need to be shared development tools across almost a set of building blocks. So I would suggest there are shared tools around skills and entrepreneurship, building the competency and the capacity of your cultural and creative sector to develop new business models and to create more sustainable practice. There's something just about having a coherent approach to that. There's an approach around networks, so making sure that your artists and your cultural institutions and organisations and creative businesses aren't just talking in a very small pool, but they're talking in a bigger pool across these different municipalities, because then you'll have a more dynamic conversation with more access to knowledge. So there are network solutions, face-to-face and digitally in terms of platforms. I think that there is probably something about presentation as well, and how you open up the visibility of the cultural sector. So in lots of rural areas, or semi-urban areas, there have been programs like open studios, where you have a program over a week or 2 weeks in the year, where the public can visit and access the sculpture studio, the artists, the design studios. Often you can present these things in very heritage environments as well. So you bring a visibility to the creative sector. And people are aware then that there's all these things happening which maybe are invisible for the rest of the year. The festival sector is also key there. Looking at your individual festivals in the different municipalities, but is there a shared festival program? You coordinate overall program for the Central Alentejo. Could each year different parts of the Central Alentejo play a leadership role to have the bigger kind of event in this? So there's that as well. I think that there's also something about how you present itineraries for tourism, and also how you present your products from this region externally, particularly in terms of the links between heritage and contemporary craft and design, and going to those global marketplaces with a clear story, a clear brand narrative for this region. And I think that there's something about the audience development piece as well, trying to generate active participation from your communities in different types of culture, and not just a narrow type of culture, trying to almost challenge audiences to be more explorative. And then in turn what you do is you generate the energy for new types of production, new types of creative activity in the future. I think often in rural areas, there is a kind of conservatism in cultural practice, and also people will not be exposed to different types of cultures. So why it's interesting that the lady from Valencia is saying they're bringing in people to co-create new types of culture with their local artists, their local cultural organisations. Because in doing so, you innovate, and you also expose your audiences to different flavours, different cultural activities, and then hopefully you inspire new types of production in the future. And it becomes a much more dynamic cultural scene as a consequence. So we need to not just invigorate producers, we need to invigorate consumers, audiences, as well in this whole process. That's why the whole value web thing is important. Is that individually, you can't just focus on one thing, you need to focus on a holistic way, on the whole cultural landscape. And it's easy to do that when you have a scale of different municipalities, with different kinds of actors. It's very hard to do that in a very narrow way in one small town.
So from Prudential that has been a considerable effort in the last years to connect this municipality, which is a small-scale municipality, to a lot of networks, national and international, based on ceramic, for instance, or lake cities, or wine cities. How do you see this approach? Do you consider it to be effective in the future and in the next period of the structural funds? Do you think this could be effective? And how does the cultural managers from municipalities should approach culture inside these networks? More or less this. Yes.
Well, first of all, I think it's really, really important to participate in these kinds of networks as much as possible. I know that they're sometimes difficult to justify politically and in terms of resources, but actually you're doing two things. One is that you're opening up your cultural system to the ideas and to the kind of connections that you'll have just by being in networks. The networks have a value for themselves. But also I think that it enables you to create a space for reflecting on what your key strengths are. And then you can use that then locally to really focus hard on building those strengths. So if you're in networks around ceramics, for example, it's only by being in those networks that you can really understand where your strengths are, what you're innovative at. And then you can go back and really push hard on that. And you push hard and develop it, but not in isolation because you're already in these networks. So you start to have a reputation as well as a place that is open and innovative in these sectors. So I would absolutely encourage you to keep doing that. And then the next phase is to, if you have the capacity, to actually more clearly imprint on those networks what your strengths are. So you become associated with a real innovation. So if we take ceramics, what is the thing that perhaps potentially means that you're a really distinctive, innovative hub for ceramics development that is interesting for other places? Because that helps them as well in terms of branding, ultimately.
So they are mainly connecting the ceramics, lakes, heritage, and wine as a cultural assets, and try to promote them outside, always in connection with tourism. So this is a bit of the strategic approach of the municipality.
And what's interesting, if we take each of these municipalities, and they all have a particular strength, but then if you pour it together, what is the collective strength?
This is the key.
Yeah. So there's almost, I don't know how far you've gone with this, but the whole exercise of mapping those key strengths from each place, and then really thinking, okay, well, what is it that's collectively we have, but also what is it that individually you can lead on? And forcing it even further, what happens if you connect a real strength in ceramics here with a real strength in, I don't know, could be around
tapestry,
yeah, or digital, or whatever. And then is there some kind of R&D exercises that can look at the connectivity between these? And it's internally as well as externally facing as well. It's key. So developing the kind of dynamic cluster internally as well as just telling the story for tourism reasons externally.
So he thinks your presentation was very good, and you approach all the main factors that we need to think when we think about creating ecosystems, and also that this is a challenge to set a creative ecosystem is a challenge even in terms of new society model or approach. So he thinks we should all embrace this challenge. It would be important to know if all the municipalities are up to it in order to generate change and to shift the paradigm towards a creative ecosystem, because we have disconnected parts, but they are not, we were not yet able to put them together as a general territory. So each one is a bit working separately, and the challenge is to connect all the assets we have. And he wants to know if you are available to help us for free. So tell this.
Because we are poor.
To help us in that process of creating this sustainability. Because at the end it's all about changing communities.
Yeah.
It's about having a group that connects everyone.
Yes.
And we need someone from outside.
Too much.
Yeah, well, it's
Like a referee.
referee. Oh my goodness, I mean, well, already I'm working with colleagues in there, so you know, I'm not quite free, but my family was. My family was. It's always a trade-off. If I leave the house, I have to come back with food. Yeah.
No, bring your family.
Well, yeah, they will be. I think that it's important at this stage as well to say that there is a big deal. This will be very challenging, but in a good way, I think, because it's an opportunity using European capital culture as a process. It's an opportunity to do things you can't do, and it's not about art. Yeah, this is about culture as a whole. It's about communities. It's about identity, and it's a chance as well to drive something new. Yeah, not just sort of respond to things and like put a little bit of plaster here, a little bit of plaster. Actually, to do something really new. And I think the timing is good as well. In that, yes, you're poor. Maybe you can look at compared to the Bavaria or to the Randstad in Holland or something. But you're very rich in other ways, in terms of culture, in terms of identity. And you're enriching as well in terms of the kinds of things that you can have here in terms of quality of life, the relationship with the land, with the sea, with the sky, all this thing. You can actually look at new ways of living and working, which is relevant at a European level. And digital is a game changer here because you can suddenly do things here and be plugged in and part of an economic paradigm, whereas historically you couldn't be because you're in such a rural place. So you can get that balance between quality of place, quality of life, quality of economy, and culture is the thing that binds it together. So it's a good moment, I think. What's also interesting is there's something to be had. There's some kind of opportunity for innovation through collaboration across different municipalities that are all quite small, and looking what that means. So actually seeing that as an adventure and seeing what that process brings. And that would be very interesting at the European level, but actually I think it might generate some really exciting things here as well.